Am I the a-hole for not agreeing to marriage counseling after my wife cheated? I never expected to find out through a missed delivery notice. That small piece of paper changed everything. I'm 34, my wife is 32. We met at a fundraising event for a local animal shelter where we both volunteered. Hit it off right away. No kids yet, though we'd been talking about it for the past year. We both work in marketing, different companies, but in similar fields. Our life wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy. That day, I came home early from work with a pounding headache. The house was quiet. I found a missed delivery notice on our door for a package that needed a signature. The delivery guy had tried dropping it off at 1:30 p.m., but no one was home. Weird. My wife had taken the day off to catch up on some personal stuff. She should have been there. I grabbed some pain meds and collapsed on the couch. As I was about to close my eyes, I noticed her planner on the coffee table. She always kept that thing with her. I flipped it open, not looking for anything, just curious. There it was, Thursday 1 p.m. Lunch with Chris, followed by a little heart. I stared at that heart and thought to myself, what the hell? My wife doesn't draw hearts in her planner, not even next to my name. Looking back, the signs were there for months. She is always out with her girlfriends, staying out late, and not answering when I called or text. Then the sudden interest in her appearance. New clothes, new haircut, weirdly guarded about her phone lately. The classic stuff you read about, but never think will happen to you. When she came home that evening, I was still on the couch, her planner open on the table. How was lunch with Chris? LOL. You should have seen her face. First confusion, then recognition, then panic. She tried to play it off, saying he was a new colleague and co-worker, but I could tell she was lying, and she would not look at me. I held up the delivery notice. Package came while you were at lunch. Interesting, since you told me you'd be home all day. That's when the truth came out. There was no shouting or dramatic confessions, just cold facts. 6 damn months. A guy she just started chatting with from the gym, and one thing led to another. They had weekly, sometimes daily meetups while I was at work. I didn't yell, didn't throw things, just felt cold all over, empty, like someone had hollowed me out. I grabbed my keys and left the house, drove around for hours. I ended up at my buddy Mac's place around midnight. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and set up the couch. The next morning, I had dozens of missed calls and texts from her. I turned off my phone and spent the day walking around the city, trying to clear my head. By evening, I knew I had to go back, had to face it. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, eyes all red. She jumped up when I walked in, tried to hug me. I stepped back. I don't want you to touch me. That's when she first mentioned counseling, said we could fix this, that people overcome affairs all the time. I just stood there, wondering who this person was, because she didn't look like the woman I married anymore. The week after I found out was hell. I moved into our spare bedroom, couldn't stand to sleep next to her, couldn't stand the smell of her perfume or the sound of her voice. I took a week off work, couldn't focus anyway, spent most days just driving around, walking in the park, or sitting in coffee shops, anything to avoid being home. My brother called on day 3. She'd reached out to him, trying to get him on her side. I wasn't surprised. She was pulling out all the stops. Maybe you should consider it, the counseling thing. Would you, if your wife cheated for 6 months? He was quiet for a moment. I don't know, man, but you guys have been together a long time. That just makes it worse. Mac had a different take when I met him for drinks that weekend. Forget counseling. She made her bed. Now she can lie in it, alone. My parents were split. Mom thought I should at least try counseling before making any decisions. Dad didn't say much, but I could tell from his face that he understood my position. You don't have to decide anything right now, Mom said. Just take some time to think. But that's all I was doing, thinking about every moment of the past 6 months, every late night, every excuse, every lie. When I finally went back to work, it was almost a relief. 8 hours where I could focus on something else. But the evenings were rough. She'd be there, watching me with those sad eyes, trying to start conversations, leaving papers lying around about marriage counselors on the counter, sending me links to articles about rebuilding trust. I started working late just to avoid going home. I started hitting the gym every night after work, anything to stay away. 2 weeks after D-Day, as I'd started calling it in my head, she ambushed me with an actual appointment card. I made us an appointment, just one session. If you hate it, we don't have to go back. I stared at the card in her hand. No, please, just try. Don't throw away 8 years without even trying. I didn't throw anything away. You did when you decided to sleep with someone else for 6 months. She flinched like I'd slapped her. And I said no, I don't want counseling. I want a divorce. It was the first time I'd said it out loud. Divorce. And seeing how that single word hit her, I felt the first hint of relief I'd experienced since finding that heart in her planner. That night, I called a lawyer friend for recommendations, started researching the divorce process in our state. It felt good to take action, to have some control again. The next day, she left for work earlier than usual. When I got home that evening, I found a box of my old photos on the bed. Our first vacation, college graduation, the day we moved into our first apartment. A note on top read, "Please remember we had good times too." I put the box in the closet without looking through it. The past didn't matter now, only the future, a future without her lies. The pressure started building after I mentioned divorce. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about my marriage. Her sister called me, furious, said I was being stubborn, that everyone deserves a second chance. Would you give your husband a second chance if he had a 6-month affair? She didn't answer that, just kept pushing counseling. My mom invited us both to dinner, clearly hoping to play peacemaker. I declined, told her I wasn't ready for that. She sighed, that deep, disappointed mom sigh. Marriage takes work, she said. Sometimes hard work, sometimes painful work. I know, Mom, but there has to be trust and respect. Over the next week, the campaign intensified. Articles about couples who survived infidelity started appearing in my email. Books about forgiveness showed up on my desk. She started going to individual therapy and made sure I knew about it. I found myself spending more time at Mac's place. His spare room became my sanctuary, the only place where no one was judging me or pressuring me to forgive and forget. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Take your time figuring this out. But I had already figured it out. I was done. The marriage was over the moment I saw that heart in her planner, because I already knew she has never ever done that for anyone in our family, even for her mom. The breaking point came when I got home from work and found my in-laws sitting in our living room. An ambush intervention. My wife looked nervous but determined. Her parents looked grim. "What is this?" I asked, still standing in the doorway. "We're worried about you both, about the decisions you're making without proper thought." I laughed. Couldn't help it. Proper thought? I've thought of nothing else for weeks. Her mother leaned forward. "Everyone makes mistakes. When I was your age, this isn't about you." I cut her off. "Or your marriage." My father-in-law frowned. "Son, all we're saying is that counseling might help you both process this in a healthier way." I looked at my wife, who was staring at her hands. "Did you tell them everything? About the 6 months of lying? About taking days off work to be with him?" Her parents exchanged glances. Clearly, she'd given them the sanitized version. "You know what? I'm done. I'm not going to be ganged up on in my own home." I walked out and drove to Mac's place again. He was becoming my refuge in this storm. That night, after a few beers, I found myself on Reddit, typing out my story. Am I the a-hole post for not agreeing to marriage counseling after my wife cheated? The responses came flooding in. Not the a-hole, not the a-hole, not the a-hole. Over and over. People sharing their own stories of betrayal and failed reconciliations. Stories of those who tried counseling only to be cheated on again. Stories of those who wished they'd left sooner. Some said I was being too harsh. That counseling wasn't about saving the marriage, but about helping us both move forward, whether together or apart. But they were the minority. One comment stood out. You don't owe her forgiveness or a second chance. You only owe yourself peace. Peace. That's what I wanted, and I knew I wouldn't find it in that house, with that woman, in counseling sessions, rehashing her betrayal. I stayed at Max that night, thinking about peace, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I felt certain about my next steps. I returned home the next day to find the house empty. A note on the kitchen counter said she was staying with her sister for a few days to give us both space. Now she wants to give us peace. Crazy. The quiet was a relief. I walked through the rooms, looking at our photos on the walls. 8 years of memory. Good ones, mostly. But now they felt tainted, like someone had drawn over them with a permanent marker. I spent the weekend researching divorce lawyers, found one with good reviews who specialized in no-fault divorces, made an appointment for the upcoming Monday morning. She texted Sunday night saying she was coming home the next day, asked if we could talk. I told her that I'd be out in the morning but would be home in the afternoon. I didn't mention the lawyer. The meeting was straightforward. The lawyer explained the process, the timeline, and the division of assets. Michigan is a no-fault state, so her cheating wouldn't impact the legal proceedings. Somehow that felt unfair, but I just wanted it over with. When I got home, her car was in the driveway. I took a deep breath before going inside, found her in the kitchen making lunch. She started talking immediately, something about a new counselor she'd found who specialized in infidelity trauma. I interrupted her. I met with the divorce lawyer this morning. She stopped what she was doing, looked at me with her mouth open. She gripped the counter like she might fall. I'm filing this week. It should be final in a few months if we cooperate on the details. Without even trying counseling? Without counseling. Without working on it. Without second chances. Is there anything I can say to change your mind? I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. There's nothing. I went to the spare room and started packing more of my clothes. Heard her crying in the kitchen for a while. Then the front door closed as she left. That night, I went back on Reddit to update my post. Thanked everyone for their input. Said I was going ahead with the divorce. The supportive comments kept coming. Over the next few weeks, we worked out the details through our lawyers. She moved in with her sister permanently. We divided our stuff without much drama. The house would be sold, the proceeds split. Friends took sides, as friends do. Some thought I was too harsh and being an a-hole. Others respected my decision. My brother eventually came around, said he understood why I couldn't forgive and forget. Some things you can't come back from, he said one night over beers, and that's okay. 6 months later, I stood in the empty house one last time before handing over the keys to the realtor. It looked smaller somehow. Just rooms now, not a home. I thought I'd feel sad, but mostly I felt calm. The divorce had been finalized the week before. I am 35 now, single again, starting over. As I closed the door behind me, I realized I'd found that peace I was looking for, not in forgiving her or trying to save what we had, but in having the courage to walk away. When people ask me now if I regret not trying harder, not going to counseling, I always give the same answer. You can't counsel away betrayal, and I stand by that. And some of the people on Reddit, for the most part, didn't think I was the a-hole.